Hi, folks. This is Keith.
This is Andy. Welcome to Brockton Bay.
Time once again for the Brockton Bay Chronicles reviewing Worm by Wildbow. This is the podcast where my good friend and co-host Andy and I talk about his first time reading of Worm. But before we get started, let me apologize in advance to our listeners. I'm dealing with a few allergy issues. I'm a little congested and my voice may not be at its best. So I'm hoping you'll cut me some slack. And without that out of the way, Andy, what's up for review today?
We're finishing Arc 7, Buzz, chapters 8 through 12, and the interlude. This week, we do have a couple of questions and comments to discuss.
Yes, we do. We have a question from a YouTube commenter, Daxford, and he asked, how does the mundanity of the out-of-costume scenes feel particularly? During this time, I always felt Taylor showed more active wants. Thoughts on his question there?
I like the mundanity. I think that's kind of a key element that's part of Wildbow's kind of roller coaster that he uses. And I think it's kind of a classical thing as well. I'm watching the latest season of Stranger Things. And one thing, it's just the pep rally at the school. Everybody's hanging out, typical high school stuff. And then the next scene, somebody's on the ceiling and getting all their limbs broken. So, you know, it provides that counterpoint where it really highlights how non-mundane, if that's a term, exotic the cape side of things is, and really helps you to focus on it. Kind of the way you might have a very bland background in a landscape or a portrait, but then, you know, the main character is lit by the artist more thoroughly. The colors are more vivid to really get that to stand out, but it wouldn't stand out as much if you didn't have the mundanity of the background.
I see your point. Cool. Thanks, Daxfer. Thanks for contributing to this episode. Next, we hear again from Megafire 7, and he asks the following. Taylor bonding with Rachel is fantastic. Which of the Undersiders is your favorite at this point? I'm going to answer that. I think at this point during the read, Gru stood out to me, and I think I've mentioned I've always kind of admired Gru as a young man, his character, the way he's written and the way he's developed. What do you think, Andy?
I guess taking this question literally, so before reading this section here, I would agree with you. After reading this section, Gru's kind of pragmatic, do what's needed side comes out a little bit more. And I don't know if Taylor is somebody I can pick, but I really like Skitter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she's my favorite. But Gru is up until the last part of this reading that we're going to go through today.
Good point. Yeah, that's a fair observation. And I don't think I figured that in my calculus when I was thinking about answering this question. Good point. Next, we hear from a new contributor, Ides of March, who has a comment and a question. Ides of March says, I'm a big fan of Worm, so it's really interesting to hear a new reader's thoughts on it. Taylor started out wanting to avoid crossover between her Cape life and her civilian life, and now she's trying to date one of her teammates. I would be interested to hear how much you think Taylor's life as a parahuman is going to mix with her life as a civilian. What do you think?
I thought this was a great question, and it kind of harked back to a little bit of Daxfer's question. So when we're in high school, we're at that weird cusp in our lives, you know, where it's like we have autonomy, we have some skills, we have some responsibility. You know, if you're having a bad day and you drove the car to school, you could probably just get in the car and drive away. So there's all this stuff swirling around. And typically, I should say, in my experience, folks have plans they make when they're kind of sitting around in their bedroom thinking, yeah, okay, this is how I have it planned out. This is how it's going to go. But then the emotions hit, you're in the midst of stuff, and, all of a sudden your plans are kind of forgotten because you're not used to, as a teenager, having to make decisions on the fly and how to necessarily explore the whole decision tree and say, yeah, well, that whole side of the tree is a bad idea right there. So I'm going to go and look at some of this. Everything makes possible sense, right? It's like you haven't tried stuff out yet. So
right.
I think it's going to continue to mix a lot. I'm guessing that she's going to want to try to keep it separate, but it's going to keep mixing together because stuff will pop up. She has to make a split second decision, and she'll just kind of go with the flow a little bit because she doesn't know better.
Right.
She hasn't tried out the decisions yet. When push comes to shove, as we'll see later, her ethics and her morals rise to the top, and she's like, all right, this is just messed up. And so there's always that core that all of us have that'll typically, that little red flashing light that says, okay, yeah, no, this is wrong.
Right.
This is what you believe. These are your principles. Go this way. So, but I think for the most part, she's going to keep mixing it up. Not to hark on Stranger Things too much, but one of the characters is on the basketball team. He had been a real nerd. His idea was, I could be both, but then he gets drawn into the popular basketball thing because he does well, and all of a sudden he's kind of turning on his former nerdy friends a little bit. So it's just part of high school and part of the maturation process.
Cool. And our final question is from Jacob Pillivan. This is actually hearkening back to Arc 5. This is where his question comes from. And it's a pretty interesting one. And Jacob asks, I've seen people claim Kaiser's interaction with Skidmark was racist, as it involved a literal Nazi verbally putting down a seeming caricature black criminal. What's your guys' opinion on that matter? Let me answer that first. Obviously, Kaiser clearly has racist animus toward Skidmark. And I think under different circumstances, in a costume appearance, he'd probably be as equally unpleasant with Gru. I think they separate the thing that makes a difference in this instance is the fact that Skidmark, everybody holds his group in disdain because of their drug use and the fact that they sell as well. So they're pretty low on the superhero, the supervillain totem pole in the Brockton Bay area anyway. The fact that Kaiser is a neo-Nazi, he's not going to like anybody who isn't one of theirs. And Skidmark being a druggie in addition to all that really isn't going to, he's just going to hate him even more.
I think that's a great point. Typically, people who have racist tendencies, have all these predetermined ideas of what people who look differently from them are going to be like, and their various failings. And so, as you said, somebody who seems to have it together, is successful, is useful, isn't a drug dealer, Kaiser or a racist would tolerate more, even if they didn't look the same as him. But somebody like Skidmark just proves Kaiser's bias. Yeah. And so then it's like, well, then all the gloves are going to come off. It's like, well, yeah, just look at you. Everybody's going to agree you're a loser. So, it's like my racism just kind of gets blended in there, Kaiser's thinking. So I would tend to agree that that's very strong racist bias, but just Skidmark's choice of crime proving that Kaiser's right about whatever non-white stereotype you want to come up with.
And again, I like that Wildbow had the guts to go here in his writing. And Kaiser, as degenerate as his beliefs are, he's a complex character, you know. And I think it adds to the story. The complexity of his character adds to the story.
That's a great point, I think, as well. It would have been easy to make Kaiser just a real two-dimensional skinhead, for want of a different term.
Sure.
You know, he could have just gotten up to stretch and then slammed Skidmark's head into the table and thrown them all out, and so this is, there is that layer of complexity, and that does make it more interesting to read. So,
all right. And we thank everybody for their contributions. We really appreciate you chiming in. And unless you've got anything else to add to that, Andy, what do you say we hit our point by point?
Let's go. That sounds good to me.
Okay. And we pick up in Arc 7, Chapter 8. The Undersiders, Gru and Skitter, are in this rather precarious position, having run into Storm Tiger, Hookwolf, and Cricket. One thing that we can note is the fact that Empire 88, we know that they have a lot of parahumans, more than the ABB, but the people who are in their ranks are extremely formidable as far as capes go.
Definitely, yeah, and they have a strong violent streak. They're not your smart criminals, white collar folks. They're the folks that want to go break kneecaps. So this is not a good situation. Harking back to our last session, this is where I kind of argued against splitting up.
Yeah,
they're definitely outgunned here. So this is right off the bat. This is looking pretty bad.
These are another fascinating collection of powers. Cricket with her sonic ability, her ability to generate radar pulses, essentially. Hookwolf and Storm Tiger with his compressed air claws, I guess, and that's pretty intimidating as a weapon goes.
Well, and he's got the perfect trump card against the darkness, right? He's got a heightened sense of smell. So all of a sudden, let's just turn on the dark and get away. That's
like
totally
usual.
Blown out of the water. Yeah. So good one by Wildbow there. And that's typically how you've got to go with these superhero stories, or it gets very repetitious.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff gets bad. Oh, turn on the darkness and muffle the sound, and we'll get out and we'll be good. We'll lick our wounds. We'll come back. So good on Wildbow to throw a monkey wrench in that plan.
I like Gru thinking on his feet. Skitter got in a pretty precarious situation, and Gru came to her rescue using that oxygen bottle and firing a couple of shots into it and making it explode. That was a good weapon, impromptu weapon.
Yeah, shades of Jaws there. Very cool little homage. I did watch Mythbusters, and they said it was very unlikely that you'd be able to blow up an oxygen tank by shooting at it. But let's leave that aside. It'd probably been damaged in the wreck, when the ambulance crashed. So it was compromised. It was ready to blow already. So
sure,
we'll leave it at that.
There you go.
But that was pretty cool. Good thinking on Gru's part.
And Cricket, her former MMA, parahuman MMA skills coming to the fore. She got into that hand-to-hand throwdown with Gru, and with her sides, I got scared pretty much for Gru. I was really concerned for the damage he was taking when he was confronting her.
Yeah, I was thinking that, man, Skitter should have taken the time to make him some armor suit before this whole encounter. I got priorities here. But yeah, that was looking pretty bad. And Cricket was, the MMA stuff definitely worked in her favor. Gru had been showing other folks how to do hand to hand, and he acknowledged he wasn't an expert or anything, but he was obviously,
he could hold his own, certainly.
yeah, and had been in a lot of scraps, and Cricket seemed to be just kind of toying with him. Definitely seemed to have the upper hand.
It was pretty bad. I'm glad that they managed to get themselves away. After he tossed the oxygen bottle over at him and fired the bullets in it and got it to explode, the two of them managed to get away and meet up with Tattletale and the rest of the team at a nearby abandoned church. And they plotted out their next moves. Gru was in pretty bad shape, and Tattletale and Skitter, while they were discussing options, decided to try to stitch him up. And I can't imagine how bad that hurt.
No doubt. Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on before we moved ahead was I had never heard the term aerokinesis before. I thought that was really cool. Talking about Storm Tiger's abilities, and that's another thing I think that's cool about Wildbow is that he seems to come up with these terms. It's not like I read comics anymore, really. But I like to think of myself as being fairly well read, and I had never heard of this before, so I thought it was a cool turn of phrase. But anyway, back to the church.
Yeah, this guy's imagination, just to linger on that. I was not as much into comic books as you were. Yeah, I like the MCU thing and the DCEU things, the movies and stuff, and I appreciate them for just entertainment. And I read a few comic books, but Wildbow has managed to rope me in to where I appreciate things like aerokinesis and some of these other abilities that these capes have. And I think that's probably because of how interesting the story is. It isn't just Cape A has, this power and Cape B counters it with that power. It's individuals, and when sometimes the more interesting thing is when the capes work in combination and how they use their bounce their abilities off of each other. It just makes them for some really good battles. I think we've touched on that before in our discussions.
I think you're right. Yeah, it to even go more full on nerd here, it reminds me of the difference when you were playing Dungeons and Dragons and everybody was just, stat nerds and just, blah, 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 roll. Okay. And then there were the folks that really got into the backstory and tried to come up with innovative things, okay, I'm falling out of the sky after being teleported. I'll use the enlarge spell on my shield, try to use it as a paraglider and see if I can, avoid splatting on the earth and stuff. So it's that cool way of looking at things and expanding beyond just the stat sheet. That is very, very interesting about this story.
So as they're mapping out their options, Gru is suggesting that one of the things he suggests is that they use guerrilla strikes, hop on the dogs and basically seek to harass and catch off guard any of the Empire 88 capes that are out there. Tattletale, using her power, says, yeah, no, that's not going to work. You're basically suffering from massive blood loss, and we need to come up with another plan. And her plan was to go straight to Purity and try to contact her. She's got Tattletale has an idea, and her thought is to go try to reach Purity. What did you think of that as an idea?
Well, I didn't know where the story was going at that point. I agreed with Tattletale's assessment of how Gru was doing and that he was in no shape to even to do guerrilla tactics, as we saw with Skitter with the concussion, as parahumans kind of degrade in their, ability to focus and that kind of thing, then they have loss of control over their powers and different things can happen or not happen. And so even if, he was able to stay upright and all that kind of thing, blood loss can lead to, impaired cognition, and who knows how that's going to affect his powers. And so that seemed a good assessment. Diving right into the lion's mouth, I don't know about that, but I figured Tattletale has something up her sleeve. So
As we've heard from Skitter's descriptions, riding the dogs is no easy task, and Gru is suffering from some major injuries. I'm sure the girls tried to stitch him up as best they can, but they're not medical professionals. Even with Tattletale's power giving her knowledge on how, more than likely the best way to deal with it, Gru's hurt. And then I think was Skitter made one observation about him removing the tattered T-shirt from underneath his leather jacket and then putting the leather jacket on back over his stitches, his uncovered stitches. And that did not sound comfortable at all. That just had to be painful.
Yeah. I mean, guessing from sports, you've had your share of injuries and, much more minor than this, but even peeling a layer of skin off your knee or something and then having to pull a pad back down over it in a game, you're like, that's not cool. I'm not happy with that.
No.
That happened to me more times than I can remember. And even with all the scar tissue, it's like, yeah, no, it still hurts really bad. I'm not enjoying that. The other thing is anybody who's ridden a horse, which is just, even just, jogging down a trail or something, will know how jarring that is. And even for a good rider, that's tiring. And so to be on these dogs, which are not going down a nice, gentle trail, they're like climbing up the side of buildings or twisting in air to do whatever they want. And then, landing with a huge shock. Yeah, I can't even imagine being all stitched up and having to try to stay on the back of Angelica or Brutus or whoever.
And with that moves us on to chapter 9, where the team, they've got their goal. They're going to go try to reach purity, and they hop the dogs. And as they head toward her location, they pass by some of the battles. They see some of the members of New Wave engaged, as well as the wards and protectorate members engaged with the Empire 88 people. And at one point, we get what I'm terming mutant dog parkour, where as you were alluding to, where Bitch has the dogs scale the size of the side of some buildings in order to try to get upward to get Purity's attention. And I just, stitches or not, that just sounds crazy. And there's one thing, you think back to the attack on the Forsberg Gallery, where they're coming down, landing on top of a roof, but the description, how Wildbow laid out their efforts to scale these buildings from the ground floor, that was something else.
Yeah, it really reminded me of the Hulk trying to either go down or come up from heights, and I'll just stick my hand in this building here and use that to slow me down, or I'll pound off the side of this building across the street to this other building 50 feet up, and then do it again. So I can't imagine trying to ride on Hulk's back, especially with the dogs with the bones sticking out, and that would be just unpleasant in the best of circumstances.
Indeed. So we get a description of some of the members of New Wave as they're engaged in the battle against Purity and her Empire 88 minions. Do you have any thoughts or impressions that you want to go over regarding New Wave?
I thought the Photon Mom thing was pretty funny. It's one of those things that you see in sports sometimes where somebody has a nickname they want to have, but then they do something goofy or whatever, and a different name catches on, and they're like, no, don't call me that. And
too late.
So exactly. It's stuck. So Photon Mom was not happy about that, but it's kind of, it makes sense. They've talked about how second generation folks pick up powers easier. And so as a parent, if you're in that business, I think you'd want to kind of train your kids. And so it makes sense they're all fighting together, but there wasn't a whole lot of in-depth information here with the New Wave folks, but it's good to see that other people are out there trying to calm things down and limit the damage, although it doesn't seem like it's being very successful.
Yeah, I was just about to allude to that. The docks, it just had to be a war field down there.
Yeah, I just tend to project forward and think, well, what's it going to be like to try to clean that up?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And it's so horrible in real life that we have the stuff going on in the Ukraine. But I think those images are similar to what the docks would look like, where it's just like, well, this used to be a downtown area of a city, and now it's just piles of rubble and destroyed vehicles. And so it's just kind of surreal to even think about what that kind of damage would cause.
A couple of the Empire 88 people that sound interesting. Crusader, Knight, and Fog. You want to tell me what you thought about any of those people?
Well, I thought they were kind of not very interesting at first. Knight and Fog seemed like they had half of Gru's power each, and so it was kind of, all right, well, this isn't so cool. But then, in typical Wildbow fashion, he kind of gets us to lean one way, and then he jukes the other way and starts popping out all these new wrinkles to the powers. And you're like, holy crap, these people how did they not take over already? You think that?
I mean, yeah, they're a powerful group. I kind of wonder what kept them at bay. Was it just that the fact that they were battling Coil for scraps of area downtown and in the docks? From everything we've seen, these guys are obviously more powerful than the ABB. And, what kept them at bay from trying to make a bigger play sooner, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I think it's just one of those things, kind of like personality types. In sports, there's tons of people with huge amount of ability, but there's only a few of them that rise to the level of superstar. Why do they make it and others don't?
True.
Then you have some people who have, lesser abilities, but they have that drive and they just push themselves to the limit, keep trying to find opportunities, and they end up being a superstar. So it just seems like Kaiser and Purity kind of, self-destructed a little bit in that, he's just this manipulator and she got sick of it.
Good point.
And so that kind of derailed. I think
because she had left, he had driven her away.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
So, and there's, we see ambition on the side of the protectorate as well, right? Where people get it in their head that they want to be this way or that way. Tattletale played on that in their battle against Armsmaster. And so it's those people who can kind of put aside their short-term goals and think long-term and say, all right, well, I need to get to this point. And so that means, I got to put aside that, in the case of Kaiser, that I hate all these folks. And instead of just going out and just acting on my hatred all the time, I need to consolidate my power, trick them into thinking I'm okay with them. And then, when they're all fish in a barrel, then I can wipe them out all at once or whatever. And more of a Coil type approach.
Yeah. I was going there. Yeah, go ahead.
So no, you go ahead. I think you got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, as you were describing that, yeah, it is the Coil approach. That would have been, had he not let his personality faults keep him down. I think Kaiser might have been able to do what Coil is doing. Maybe a little more subterfuge, maybe a little more low key, and not driven away the people who could have assisted him the most. Purity is a pretty powerful cape, and Kaiser's inability, it seems like Kaiser's inability to quash his own ego when necessary drove her away, and some of his underlings. So perhaps that's what saved Brockton Bay from being taken over by a group of neo-Nazi capes.
Exactly. I think that's what it was. I mean, who knows? It could still happen. Kaiser was trying to patch things up and trying to manipulate Purity into, hey, you could have the whole shebang, just try it out for a year.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like my leadership, I'll let you be the leader. It seemed like she was smart enough to realize there must be some catch. But if he was able to, I mean, I think somebody who's a very, has these messed up ideas and stuff, they tend to not be good as the face of an organization, because eventually they'll let something slip and they'll tick a bunch of people off. And so if you can have somebody else as the face of the organization that's more attractive or acceptable or less upsetting or bothersome to people, and you can be kind of the kingmaker or the person behind the throne, you get what you want without risking somebody seeing your ugly underbelly.
Mm-hmm. So as we move further into this chapter, we have the Undersiders trying to deal with Night and Fog. They get past the Crusader and a couple of the other individuals, and this is where we see Night's unique power set and how it is limited by the Manton effect. At one point, Skitter's pretty rattled, and she asked Tattletale about Night's power, and Tattletale says this: imagine that this woman got powers that let her turn into something so wrong that she's got some sort of mental block that keeps her from transforming if anyone can see. Maybe because she's so ashamed of being seen like that. When nobody's looking, though, she's a monster. Lightning fast, all sharp. That's not even remotely close to the truth, Tattletale confessed, but it's the best I can offer you. Don't take your eyes off of her. This is some kind of a Lovecraftian horror as I think about her. And yet, if you look at her, for whatever rules under the Manton effect, she comes back from that monstrous form and returns to human form. And that added a very interesting wrinkle to the battle.
First off, nice use of the word Lovecraftian.
Thank you.
That's classic. I think it's perfect for this situation. It's one of those kind of Hitchcock things also, where Wildbow gives enough that you are creeped out by what's going on, but doesn't describe it so much that you don't have your imagination run wild and think, oh,
yes,
well, maybe it's this disgusting, or what could it be? Oh my gosh, this is horrible. So a great literary vehicle that he uses there. One thing that the Undersiders have gotten good at is kind of recognizing when they need to skate. And this person, again, Wildbow, is using that, okay, that's your strategy. I'll counter that by turn your back on me and find out what happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Skitter does that. I mean, first of all, Night is very effectively armed between smoke grenades and flashbangs in order to get individuals, in order to mask herself from individuals so she can turn monstrous. And Skitter makes that stupid play, I'm sorry, to grab the smoke grenade and run past her. And she's lucky she didn't get some kind of monstrous claw jammed through her spine.
Yeah, that was not a great tactical decision there. But in Skitter's defense, this is, to kind of party on your term, kind of otherworldly. It's just, it's hard to even imagine that. Okay, when I was looking at you a second ago, you were just getting ready to poke me with a stick, and now I get past you and I feel like a meat grinder the size of a tank is going up my back. So where did that come from? So, I mean, I give her a little bit of leeway on that because it's just kind of mind blowing. Yeah. And Night has definitely built her whole armament around, as you said, being able to shield herself from other people's eyes so that she can really mess them up.
And at one point, as we're moving into chapter 10, Purity comes down. She notices a commotion and she comes down to the side of her underlings. Tattletale had to shoot Night when she was in her human form. And because Knight had a knife to Skitter's throat and was going to cut her throat. And yeah, I shouldn't blow past that. Tattletale didn't want to have to shoot her, but she did. She had to save her teammate.
Yeah, I was surprised at how unhappy Tattletale was. In retrospect, I shouldn't have been. She's very much the analyst of the group, if you will, the not the field agent. She's the one who's trying to mess with people's minds or plan stuff out, find the leverage on somebody to be able to turn the tide in a battle. But yeah, she stepped up and did what needed to be done, but was obviously very upset about having to do it.
Getting back to Purity's arrival, Skitter made an observation about the complement of Purity's team, and it makes sense. You've got this one individual in Knight who can only be her monstrous self when she's not, you can't observe her. And on the other hand, you've got Purity, who's so bright you have to close your eyes sometimes to shut your eyes from her light. And you have Fog, who can provide a curtain of fog and allow Knight to become her monster form. So as a unit, it makes sense that Purity would have them on her personal bodyguard, as it were, as Skitter made that observation.
Yeah, very complementary skills. It's kind of like one hero being able to attack you in the open. So you see a forest and you think, oh, I'll run in there. And then one of the trees is a different kind of superhero that's hiding in the forest and wraps you up in branches or something. So it's they balance each other out very well. There's no way to, have one size fits all to kind of defeat them. If you make it dark, you're playing into some people's hands. If you make it light, you're playing into other people's hands. And yeah, as you said, they do things, and what they did kind of empower their co-conspirators. So very, very complimentary.
Gru is in awful shape now. He's collapsed, basically. He's on his hands and knees on the ground. Tattletale's like, oh my gosh, the blood loss. He's not able to generate any of his darkness, or it evaporates as soon as he produces it. Once Purity does show up, Tattletale tries to implement her plan, and her idea is to let Purity know where her daughter is. And in exchange for that, Purity is going to stop terrorizing the docks and is going to let the rest of the Undersiders go. This was a pretty gutsy move on Tattletale's part.
And this is where she's kind of playing that card up her sleeve, I guess. Right from the get-go, she realized that the reason Purity was berserk was the whole kind of mama bear thing. So she's figuring if she can get through to her and say, I know where the cub is, let's put an end to this, that, that's the best way to de-escalate things. But yeah, it's putting it all on the line. I mean, if Purity had just, gone past the point of conscious thought, then she could have just cooked everybody down to puddles in the street and then just gone back to blasting the docks. So,
and Tattletale successfully plays off Purity's suspicion about Kaiser's veracity, I guess, if that's the correct way to use that. Caden has doubts about her ex-husband, and good on Tattletale for being able to basically say, who can you trust when it comes down to your daughter, me or the guy who's been lying to you?
Yeah, excellent point. Tattletale's powers really coming to save the day here. Being able to sense the doubt and being able to play on that, as you said. That was the key to the whole thing, was that, okay, yeah, my kid's gone. That's horrible. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get her back. And it must be these people. And then it's like, oh, wait, maybe it's not. This does kind of sound like Kaiser.
Yeah. This fits his MO kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the right way to put it.
And so he had put enough doubt in their past experiences, he put just enough doubt in her mind that Tattletale was able to kind of squeeze in there with the truth.
Yeah, there's been enough bad water under that bridge that Tattletale's able to get a crowbar in there and pry it loose a little bit. And Purity's willing to take her with her and at least check it out.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to steamroll past the dogs in this battle. Brutus, Judas, and Angelica, they gave their all and they got beat up pretty good, unfortunately, especially poor Angelica.
Yeah, that was, I'd come to think of them as kind of indestructible almost, that they would get hurt, but then when they shrank back down, all the damage would be gone. But they ran into a buzzsaw with Knight and they're pretty messed up. So that's hard to take. I thought Wildbow could have maybe had Bitch go a little bit more berserk, or try to do more personal stuff, or I don't know, find a stray and try to make it big, just to try to fight back for her dogs and protect them, do whatever it took to protect the pack. But she could have just been stunned by how messed up they were and just worried about their health too. So could have gone either way.
Okay. No, good point. So after Tattletale talks with Purity and explains the location, tells her what the location of her baby girl is, Purity tells the rest of her goons, look, the rest of the Undersiders are they're gonna walk. So she grabs Tattletale and the two of them take off into the night to find her baby. The rest of the Empire 88 goons, they make a minor little show of, we could kill you if we want to, but we're going to leave. And Regent in his typical nonchalant, whatever, we know you can kill us, just can we go now kind of thing. Typical Regent reaction there. Gru is in bad shape, in addition to the dogs, as we know. And Skitter puts in a frantic call to Coil to get the team get a ride and get Gru to the Cape Doctor.
Yeah, thank goodness that they had that lifeline, so to speak, that they could reach out to Coil. They kind of don't have any choice, but given how Coil has kind of put them in the crosshairs, you could see where they might be reluctant, but what choice do they have? I mean, Gru's in such bad shape. All the dogs are in bad shape. So yeah, it's the best they can do. And, Skitter's just glad that they make it out of the alley without anybody else showing up.
Yeah, that they would have been done for, as she knew and alluded to. Had one of the good guy capes showed up, they'd have been in trouble. If some other rogue guys showed up, then they would have been in trouble. So it was just fortunate that they were able to meet up with Coil's people and their ride and get Gru looked after. So we move on to chapter 11, and it's a week later, and the Undersiders go to Coil's base and have a meeting with him there. And wow, what a facility, huh?
Yeah, it was. I guess I wasn't quite as impressed as you were. I got the impression that Coil had been having these machinations for decades, and so I figured, and he may only be showing a portion of it. This might be just the entryway, so to speak. There could be tons of stuff off to the sides, but it was pretty cool, and it's definitely kind of hiding in plain sight, so that's pretty neat. Nobody's ever going to find it there, but I don't know, it was still pretty neat. But the team is not happy.
Yeah, and they've got a good point. I mean, we've commented on in the past about how effective a unit the Undersiders are, but in their talk with Coil, Tattletale's like, look, we did A, B, and C in the span of a short period of time, taking on these various heroes and villains. And you know what, dude, you're taxing us a little bit, and we may not be up for this. And she's got a point.
Definitely. And it seems strange because Coil is supposed to be this mastermind. So you wonder, all right, did he foresee this? And, he needs to push them to the brink to get stuff to happen. Or, with Coyle, you're always wondering what the other shoe is that's going to drop.
Yeah.
And there is a different one coming up here, but it's very concerning from the undersider's perspective. How, to use a sports analogy again, you've got this great running back, and it's like, all right, on this play, you're going to block the defensive end, or on this play, you're going to cover the kickoff return. And you're like, well, why do you keep putting me in these positions? This is not my natural, this isn't playing to my strengths. And so, yeah, totally understand where they're coming from. And it is concerning. And it's kind of surprising Coyle admits that, maybe he hasn't been doing very well on some of this stuff.
He does acknowledge that his decision to dump that data may not have been the wisest of moves. And yeah, dude, not for the undersiders anyway.
No, for sure.
In an effort to try to get the undersiders to placate him a little bit, Coyle brings out one of his latest acquired assets, his pet. This was a pretty dark addition to the story. What were your thoughts on this?
Well, I want to touch on the numbers part of it there for a second.
Sure.
So, it seems like Coyle's surprised that the numbers keep changing.
Mm-hmm.
But, if this person is able to do what they kind of allude to, that she's able to take all these variables into account and, come up with a calculation, then, you've got kind of like a stock market effect, by saying, oh, okay, I'm planning to do this and I'll throw these things in here. So, like, to use a stock market, I'm planning on shorting this and putting the money in that.
Mm-hmm.
Then, somebody's going to see that, well, there are going to be ripple effects. It's not just in a vacuum. And so by Coyle saying, I'm going to do this, this, and this, then she's able to see the variables and say, okay, the fact that you're even thinking about that is now letting me see other consequences that might come out of that. And then other people are probably thinking the same thing. You're not the only big brain around. So the next time you ask me, the numbers might be different. So that was cool. I thought that was a really good grasp of statistical analysis. It's like trying to track a hurricane. There's a reason that they have that whole cone of where it can go, because, if it hits a patch of cold water, it's going to lose energy. If it hits a front coming from the other side, it's going to deflect. And so those numbers are constantly changing because the weather's not static. It's constantly changing. So Coyle, it definitely seems like it's pointing out a little bit of a flaw, that he's like, all right, I want these numbers to add up and stay this way. And it's like, well, no, that's not how this works. Everybody else is trying to get their own stuff going too. So while you're sitting here talking to me about this, other people are doing their thing, and that's changing the probability of you being successful.
I see. And so you think that's the way things normally would work. And correct me if I'm wrong, with keeping in mind what you just speculated on. Coyle does seem surprised that the numbers changed as radically, and to the point where he said something is wrong. I got the impression that the number, when he first asked her about this the previous time, the numbers were fairly static, with his help, without his help, travelers or undersiders. It was only when their meeting with the undersiders and he asked her the questions, then the numbers significantly changed. Are you still accounting for that?
Well, that's a perfect example of how it's a new variable, right? When Coyle asks, the undersiders don't know his plans. And so their motivation is not one of the variables. Their response to his queries is not one of the variables. But while they're standing there and he's asking, they're like, wait a minute, you're swapping us out with the travelers. You're trying to show that if you're involved, things are going to be way better. you're kind of pissing us off right now. And so our motivation to really work well in this is going to go down. So
Okay.
that's how I read it.
All right. Very cool. All right. So yeah, Coyle is kind of shook by the fact that the numbers changed so much, and to where he dismisses the Undersiders and says, "Look, I got to deal with this." He asked Tattletale if she has, if her powers are telling her anything about why these numbers may have changed, and she's like, "No." And she tries to talk with him, and he's like, "Yeah, well, fine. I'm done here. You guys can go. I got to go deal with this." And the Undersiders go to leave the base, and that's where we have a pretty significant fracture in the group develop.
Boy, I'll say, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where Skitter has gotten all caught up in, hey, I've finally got some friends. I've got, I'm doing things that make sense to me. Yeah, my original plan isn't on track anymore, but I haven't gone way off the rails yet. But then when she realizes what really is going on in this situation and kind of the ripples and how they've been used, she gets, her principles really come to the fore, and she's like, this is just so wrong. I can't handle this, and I can't believe you all are thinking it's okay.
Yeah, and I'm glad that as far as the story construction goes, Wildbow ties this back. The capture of this young girl, this Dinah Alcott, the capture of her goes back to the bank job, and that's what's set Skitter off. She's like, "Hey, he used us. We were unwilling participants, but he used us. We can't be okay with the kidnapping and drugging of a little girl."
That's spot on. Yeah, it's just, they had questions on why things were going down the way they were when it happened, and they weren't even sure what the deal was. Coyle tried to, come up with other motivations that would explain it. But when all the pieces fall into place for Skitter, yeah, the term revulsion, I think, is the exact term. It's just, if you had asked us to kidnap a little girl and pump her full of drugs for you, there's no way we would have said yes.
Right.
And we didn't do it directly, but what we did enabled you to do it. So that's just totally not cool.
So it's a definite reality check for Skitter. Was this part of her only seeing what she wanted to see? That kind of goes back to what you were just saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, people rarely get into bad situations by just, being on the right path and then saying, you know what, I'm going to do 180 and go on the wrong path. It's usually a gradual thing. And we've seen that with Skitter, and the budding friendships with the Undersiders, the realization that people in the Protectorate were knuckleheads too, and they're not all goody, and that maybe you can fight evil, really bad evil with lesser evil. You don't have to fight it just with good. And it's kind of rationalization, typical stuff that people go through. But people who have that strong moral fiber eventually get to a point where they're like, all right, wait a minute, I can't rationalize this. This is just so far against what I believe that, all right, now I recognize I am on the wrong path. And if you all can't recognize that too, then we're not going to get along very well.
As far as the rationalizations or excuses for the team goes, Regent doesn't care. He says, "Hey, I grew up with this. This was, my father used powers, but I got no issues with this. Bitch is, hey, as long as I get what I need to help take care of my dogs, I got no problem with this." Gru is, well, my primary concern, and yeah, this is where I get his concern, but I didn't like the excuse making. His concern was his loyalty to his family member, his sister and his teammates. That was his concern. Tattletale was the only one who I thought might have felt ashamed, maybe.
Yeah, revolted was the term you used earlier,
Mm-hmm.
revulsion. To hark all the way back to the beginning of this, the reason that people were so willing to kind of party on, bashing on Skidmark and his group was that they're drug dealers getting kids hooked on drugs, which everybody can agree is a really bad thing. It steals people's lives, it destroys them. And it hits the most vulnerable, and it's for personal gain, and here they are basically. Coyle's kind of like a drug dealer. He's a pusher for this girl so that he can get her to do what she wants, just like somebody who's doing human trafficking or whatever. So yeah, it's totally revolting. And this girl isn't that much younger than Skitter.
Right.
So she's like, yeah, my dad warned me about this kind of crap my whole life, that I had to watch out for people saying, hey, I've got something for you. Just come around here and check this out, and all the stranger danger stuff we grew up with. Right. So,
Yeah.
and here they are, they basically enabled Coyle to get this kid hooked on drugs for his own personal gain. So yeah, it's revolting. And I'm glad Skitter is revolted by it.
Yeah. She recognizes the situation for what it is, and she's upset at herself and her friends to the point where she tries to walk off from from Coyle's base. Brian is like, "Hey, let's get back to the loft, and we'll discuss this as a team." Skitter's had it. She tries to leave, and it looks like for a brief moment there might be a confrontation between Skitter and the rest of the Undersiders. She starts going through her mental utility belt, as it were, looking at her options to fight them.
Yeah, because things have finally crossed the line for her. And the fact that the people that she's trusted, that she's bled with, that she's fought side by side with, that she saved their lives, they've saved her lives. All of a sudden, there's just this fundamental chasm between them now, where, Gru has basically sold his soul. He has said, whatever it takes to protect my family and my team, I will do that. And, in some sense, that's an admirable trait, but you can't throw all the principles out for that. We can't all, come up with some scheme to home invade some elderly people and steal their money just so that our kid can go to the best school.
Right.
You can't justify that. There's just no way to justify what Coyle did to that little girl. And so, there's this chasm now where Skitter's just like, I don't even get how you cannot see the problem here. And so, yeah, if you're going to try to stop me, we're going to come to blows.
It's some good complex storytelling here, and I really enjoy it. It really works. We've seen Skitter Taylor making this journey, and as you said, she's got her principles, and this is just past that line, and she can't brook it any further. So Skitter heads back to the loft. She begins gathering her things, and she's going to take off. Poor Angelica is at the loft, and she is still trying to recover. Her injuries are pretty significant from the bout where she got caught in some of Fogg's mist, and poor Angelica, she's really moving slow.
Yeah, to the point where Taylor thought she might have died, that she did seem to be breathing and was obviously not moving for long periods of time. And so, but it seems like she's able to get up and get around, although not able to get back on the couch after a short stroll across the living room. So yeah, as you said, still in really bad shape. And so that'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to hopefully to seeing more about what Fogg's powers are within the Fog. It's obviously a lot more violent than Gru's just darkness and sound deadening, that there's something going on in there, and bad enough that it really messed up Angelica. So hoping to hear more about that.
So as Taylor is back at the loft, and she goes into her room, and she begins to gather up some belongings to take with her as she gets ready to depart. And she's in her room, and she's kind of taking a mental inventory of how she got to this point. she was beginning to make the room her own and decorate it a little bit and feeling more at home there. And at one point, she acknowledges to herself she was adrift. Her whole existence prior to this point had been making plans. At first, it was early part of her high school years was just trying to make it through the day, then trying to make it through the weekend and recharge your batteries. And then she got her powers, and then it was setting her plans for becoming a superhero. And then she met the Undersiders and that whole thing. And now at this moment, she's adrift. She back at square one. She has no idea what her next step is going to be.
Yeah, this is a pretty shattering situation. You know, you feel like, as you said, all right, there was steady improvement, and yes, I had to compromise a little bit, and yes, my relationship with my dad is strained now. You know, it wasn't all rosy, not all rainbows and unicorns, but in general, heading in the right direction. And now it's all come crashing down. And in some sense, it's like I'm worse off than I was before. You know, I thought I had all these friends. It's like another betrayal. It's not a bullying by someone you thought was your best friend, but it's a huge reveal of
just who they are.
Yeah, exactly, who they are.
So Lisa arrives back at the loft, and the two of them have a heart to heart and discuss where they are as friends. Lisa's like, hey, you aren't going to do anything stupid like try to rescue Dinah by yourself, are you? Because if you do, you realize there's a outside chance we may have to stop you. And Taylor's like, hey, do what you got to do and I'll do the same.
Right. And, that's kind of all Taylor can say is that, if when you're faced with that kind of thing, you have to put up or shut up. And if it turns out that these people that she thought were her friends are going to stand in her way in what is obviously a very messed up situation, then it's like, fine, I guess you weren't my friends after all. I mean, it's just it's so messed up. So yeah, it's very, very difficult situation to be in. But, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I think I kind of predicted that it would probably get to a point where Taylor wouldn't compromise anymore and there would be a fallout. So
yeah, you did. Lisa's genuinely hurt that the strain is on their friendship, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think it shows the danger of repeated compromise and rationalizing, and a lack of introspection. We all have different paths we go through life. We all have different stuff we have to deal with. But if you don't take a minute to examine what you're doing and examine the path you're on, then you have this danger of you just keep, crossing the line a little bit more each time. And then you don't understand why people are upset with it. We were talking about racism earlier. I had a friend back in the day, really cool guy. I went to church with him and everything. And we got talking after church basketball one time, and he just said all these racist things. And I was like, dude, where is that coming from? And he's like, well, that's just how it is. And I'm like, no, it's not. Why do you think your life is different than the people you're talking about from the other side of the tracks or whatever? And he said, well, it's because of the color of my skin. I'm like, no, it's because you grew up with certain role models, certain paths that were available to you, certain benefits, certain things, privileges, and other people did not have those. And they had negative role models, and it was totally okay for them to go down paths you would never consider to go down. That doesn't make it a function of how they look.
Right.
That's an environmental thing. But he just couldn't get it. And I was like, wow, I thought this guy was really cool. And now I doubt everything about him. How could he even be spouting this stuff? So that's the danger of just not taking a minute to think about, well, yeah, my parents say this, and the people I hang out with, I say this, but I've interacted with some folks that are different than me, and it doesn't, I'm hearing doesn't match up with what I'm seeing. So how, where's the disconnect here? Yeah, if you keep compromising, you get to the point where you don't understand why other people aren't willing to do the same thing, and it is very painful then, because you're brought face to face with the fact that maybe I am a crappy person, and nobody wants to think that, So
as Taylor's getting ready to leave, Tattletale says, "Look, at least be open to hearing us out in the future. Surely our friendship is worth that much to you." Taylor kind of nods her head and says, okay. And Tattletale says, "Look, I'm not going to say goodbye because I'm going to resolve this situation with Coyle no matter what." Again, wanting to salvage the situation. Taylor clearly is an important person to her, and she's going to figure out some kind of way to get her back with the Undersiders. As Taylor's getting ready to head down the stairs and out of the loft, suddenly we begin to hear the sound of air raid sirens. Taylor goes back upstairs. Lisa's watching the television. She asks Lisa, hey, is this a bomb scare? Did Bakuda leave something behind? And Lisa shakes her head and says one word: Endbringer. What do you think of that?
That was a shocker. It's it's out of the frying pan into the fire, and somebody dumped gasoline into the fire too. It's kind of.
Do you remember episode 3, our third episode, when how to phrase this? We were discussing Tattletale's talk about the various levels of villainy, and you had said these Endbringers were pretty bad folks. You remember that conversation?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I guess the name kind of gives it away. It's not like, butt kicker or stab and shoot you guy or whatever. This is the end bringer, which kind of implies end for everybody or everything. So,
well, to be continued on that part of the conversation, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah, just wait till you get into to arc 8. So, and now we move on to interlude 7, Hannah, and we meet this young girl named Hannah, and we see her being forced to walk down a path in woods, looking for booby traps. She's being directed by a Turkish soldier. Her village is caught in a war zone, and up until fairly recently, their village had escaped most of the heavy fighting until some foreign soldiers came in and slaughtered everybody and made the children start walking paths trying to clear booby traps.
Yeah, this is one of those messed up things about wars that you rarely hear about. And, to harken back to the Ukrainian conflict, there are people that sign up to be soldiers. And then there are other people that just got caught in the middle, and, just unimaginably horrible things happen to them. And, they describe what happened to the other kid that was the pathfinder, if you will, and how horrible things went with them. And so, here she is in the midst of it, and something happens though. And very cool description of what goes on in her mind, or what she can perceive, I guess.
Yeah. And we find out pretty quickly that this Hannah young lady is actually Miss Militia. And Miss Militia is an immigrant to the United States. And we get Wildbow's first description of what appears to be a trigger event. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I mean, you used the term Lovecraftian earlier. It's kind of along those lines again, where it's these things that are almost, so big to be beyond imagining, and so hard to wrap your mind around. And, she's, in this situation that there's just no way to move forward, literally. And then all of a sudden, she's granted her powers, and she's not sure what's happening, but she picks up on it pretty quick and is able to, save most of the people that are still alive in the village.
She has this almost out of body experience, if you will, comes back to herself and ends up with a gun in her hand. She notices the crackling energy in front of her, reaches out to touch it, and a gun settles in her hand. And her first thought is, well, this won't work. And it dissolves and then reappears in the fashion of the type of weapon that she would need to kill the soldiers. And she turns around and guns them down, thus saving herself and the other children.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. And Wildbow's description of the otherworldly being or force that touched her, or that she touched, was really, really interesting, and kind of, I think, is a little peek behind the curtain of maybe some of what's happening with the Parahumans, that there's kind of like the hero's eclipse event or whatever, Mm-hmm. So that's pretty neat. I thought he did a great job of describing that.
And as part of this interlude, the story goes on. We get it bounces a little bit back and forth as Hannah, or Miss Militia, remembers her coming to America and trying to adapt to her new home, and learning how to be a member of one of the earliest ward teams. And yeah, it sounded like quite the, well, I wouldn't say adventure, but she adjusted fairly quickly and fairly well.
Yeah, I want to touch on the knife aspect, though, and the fact that she doesn't sleep at all, so
right,
that kind of leads to this whole reflection, because when she does finally rest, she's able to recall things, even though she knows that she was ordered to forget things. She's still able to remember that she's supposed to forget it. I don't know, it was a little confusing, but it was cool.
Yeah, thank you. The good description. Go ahead, continue.
Well, and then it gets into how, she came to the attention of the military because they would frisk her, they'd get rid of stuff, and then all of a sudden she'd have a weapon back, and they're like, okay, something's going on here. Maybe we can use this. But it's almost like a talisman, if you will, or some kind of, it kind of reminds me of, well, I guess that's not a good example. I don't know. I guess talisman is the best thing, that there's somehow this link between her and an object that she carries that, she always has with her somehow. And it's this touchstone that she can reconnect with her past and her memories, even ones that were supposed to be erased.
So Miss Militia, we're in the present. We get her waking up from one of her extremely rare slumbers. She gets herself, freshens up a little bit, and then heads over to Arms Master's workshop. And she has a conversation with him, and we find out Arms Master's name is Colin. And he's been working through the night with Dragon on some of his new equipment, some improvements to his halberd.
Yeah, it reminds me of Iron Man a little bit at this point, where he's got his racks of weapons and different suits of armor on stands and that kind of thing. But it's kind of funny that you have the one person who doesn't need to sleep, but then you have the Tinker Arms Master guy who forgets to sleep because he gets wrapped up in trying to solve a technical problem.
Here's something where we see, as part of his grand plan, Coyle had mentioned his desire to affect not just the villains in Brockton Bay, but he wanted to affect a restructuring of the protectorate. And it looks like that portion of his plan has borne fruit.
Yeah, I had kind of lost sight of that. But now that you bring it up, I think you're exactly right. I was just focused on, Arms Master is kind of a unpleasant guy. And so a lot of people don't like him. So they're moving him out. He's had not a great track record against the Undersiders. But yeah, this was, as you say, all part of Coyle's plan. And it definitely seems like the wheels are turning, and and things are happening. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Armsmaster goes over the realignment, the reassignments that will affect the Ward's team as well as the Brockton Bay Protectorate members. Turns out that Armsmaster is getting sent off to Chicago. At first, Miss Militia is happy for him, thinking that he's getting sent to take over a high profile team in a larger city. And she asked where's Mirden, who is the leader of that protectorate, asked where's he going? And Armsmaster says he's staying. And then she realizes, oh my, well, gee, I'm sorry. You're getting demoted. Yeah, that's unfortunate. She tries to she feels bad for him. Genuinely, she feels bad for him.
Yeah, she knows that Wildbow kind of implies she knows that Colin has his strengths, but that she's better at the people side of things, emotional intelligence, if you will. So it is too bad, but she's probably not totally surprised that he's not getting to lead, a big city group like that.
Yeah. And we get a name assigned to folks like the folks who have the weird tattoo on their bodies, Neuter, and I can't remember his name. Gregor. Oh my God.
Gregor the snail. Yeah.
Yes. And it turns out that one of the new wards who's going to be coming to Brockton Bay, a kid named Weld, is one of what they're calling case 53s, people who have this mysterious tattoo. So now we have a name for them.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if that was the same thing or if it was another group that was being manipulated, because the tattoo wasn't described as a 53 at all, was it? I mean, it was like an Omega symbol or something, or
that's a closer description. Yeah.
So, but this is the same, if you will, generated parahumans as opposed to triggered parahumans.
That's your thought?
Oh, no, I'm thinking it's different, but that's just because, like I said, the symbols sound different.
Yeah, it was definitely not. It's not a numeral. It is a symbol, and at this point, yeah, I'm under the belief that it is the same as Gregor and Neuter.
Okay,
and so yeah, this Weld is a metallic kid, for lack of a better description, and he's going to be coming over as one of the new members to run the Ward's team. As they're having their discussion, Armsmaster asked Dragon, who's live Skyping in, to look at this program that she had provided him. He had made some modifications to it, and he asked her if his modifications were good. And it turns out Armsmaster has developed an early warning system for the Endbringers. I bet you appreciated all the computer work.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And it makes sense. It's just like we were talking about tracking hurricanes earlier. There should be some kind of disturbance in the atmosphere or whatever. If you can just get the data and crunch it, you might be able to detect trends or patterns. And very cool juxtaposition of machine learning versus intuition, where you have, one thing being able to come up with all sorts of stuff and crunch all sorts of numbers, but Colin coming up with an intuitive tweak that makes things work better.
Yeah. Yeah. So as they're looking at the data, Dragon confirms that his modifications are good. And Armsmaster says, good enough to call for help. And she said, good enough. And then from there, it's firing up the air raid sirens. He directs Miss Militia to contact the locals. And Dragon starts calling the other protectorate teams and Director Piggott. And they're getting ready to face the Endbringer. Stay tuned.
Okay. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. And with that, that's the end of Arc 7. What do you think, brother?
Well, I'm starting to wonder if Brockton Bay is ever going to exist in the next couple of arcs. There's just going to be a smoking crater here, and it's nobody's going to care anymore. It's going to be, like that city that got lifted out of the ground in one of those Marvel movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time you turn around, there's something worth showing up. So, and it's, I'm intrigued to see what happens with Skitter. She's in a really tough spot now. I'm guessing the Undersiders will give her space, but it's looking like she might be, what was it called? OBE, overcome by events.
Yeah.
With the Endbringer showing up, all of a sudden everything else is going to kind of have to go to the back burner, and hopefully she won't lose sight of why she was getting ready to leave.
Is this a breach that can be repaired? I mean, she's you remain optimistic about her father. Setting aside the Endbringer, is this a breach between her and the Undersiders that you think could be repaired?
Well, I think it's going to be on the Undersiders. We all can have those seminal moments when we're confronted with, the error of our ways, and we can choose to stick to our guns, or we can kind of take the higher road and say, all right, yeah, there's some validity to that criticism. I see where you're coming from with that. I think back to playing golf with my best friend in high school, and I had a really bad temper, still do. I just control it a lot better now, and I'd get really mad on the golf course. And finally one time he said, you know what, it's not even fun playing golf with you anymore. And I was like, what? He's like, you get all bent out of shape. He's like, how often do you go to practice? You just come out here and flail around, and then you get mad when it doesn't work. It's if you were practicing and then you were not doing well, I can understand the anger, but you got to dial it back. And I was like, wow, you got a really good point. You're my best friend, and you don't even want to hang out with me because of my anger. And yeah, I don't practice hardly ever. So, two things that came out of it were I started practicing more, and sure, I started, looking for the good things that happened rather than focusing on the things that didn't work out. If I had a good shot, all right, cool. That practice paid off right there. If I had a bad one, it's like, well, I need more practice, not being like, what the heck? And so, and obviously back in high school, my language was a little bit saltier than that, but I've dialed that back too. So I think if the Undersiders can realize, all right, wait a minute, Skitter's got a point here. This is way messed up, especially Tattletale. That's any father's worst nightmare. And, that's things that young girls it's harped on by their parents. Watch out for this. You can get trapped,
right?
You can get drawn in, and then you can't escape. And so you would think that if Skitter can convince Taylor that this is too far, this has gone over the line, and if Skitter can convince Tattletale, mm-hmm, then the Undersiders might be able to reconnect, or at least you could repair the relationship with Tattletale. But if they're too far down that road and they just don't want to admit that, then yeah, I don't think it can be saved.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens with the relationship of the squad going forward then. So now it's time for Andy to announce his choice for key character of the arc. Whether hero or villain, cape or civilian, Andy will identify the characters that stood out to him, whether it's for good or ill. Andy, who's your selection this week and why?
Well, this was a really tough one because there were lots of cool things, lots of new things that kept going. Things were bouncing back and forth all over the place. And then there were some folks that, coil with this girl, for instance, and the Undersiders' reaction that was just very disturbing and, disappointing. And so, but I think I'm going to have to go with Knight. I really thought her powers were very interesting, a very kind of new twist. We had been Wildbow had mentioned the Manton effect a few times, and it seems like somehow this is a loophole.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's very interesting. And the thing with the cape I thought was really cool, that she developed it with the hooks on it so that she could use that as a way to make it so that people couldn't see her. And then she could carve them up when she was, Shoggoth or whatever from the Cthulhu Lovecraftian mythos. So
yeah, because if you were one-on-one, if you were a superhero one-on-one with Night, and she tossed the that cape on you and the hooks got you, you were blinded and you were in trouble.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, Wildbow has shown us time and again that to every, great strategy, there's a counter strategy. There's a tactic you can use to overcome a different tactic. But this was just such a new wrinkle that really stood out to me. So Night is my key character of the arc.
Outstanding. Very good. All right. And with that, folks, we want to say thanks so much for coming and spending time with us. Thanks for all your comments and suggestions. We appreciate it. So keep them coming. And until next time, take care.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Keith said, I really appreciate the thought-provoking comments. It's easy for me to get caught up in what I'm thinking about, but you guys definitely, and gals, bring different perspectives, and that causes me to rethink things and relook at things, which makes it even more enjoyable for me. So thanks so much, and appreciate it. And we'll look forward to talking to you again in a couple weeks.
Thanks for joining us in this video. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.